Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Sean, it's good seeing you.
What is on your mind this week?
Um, I just read a study that reminds me of a conversation I had with some of my family members earlier this week, and it's I don't mean to start off on a kind of a downer note or to bring this down, but it was a discussion we were having with our family about how when especially it seems like people that are older that have been married for a long time, if a spouse dies, then the grief can be so intense that it's the other spouse dies soon after. And I'm trying to think now of that movie, so I'm going to throw it to you because you'll remember. But it's a movie by I think Nicholas Sparks or something where the husband and wife, that one of them had Alzheimer's and they kind of died at the same
Yeah,
time.
it's called The Notebook.
The Notebook, yeah, that's right. Thank
Yeah.
you. So that was what we were discussing, not the Notebook, but we were discussing this idea of family members, and it's sad on one hand, but then you're thinking, man, they're so sad, and like I don't want to live without my spouse. You hear people say that I don't want to live without my spouse, and then it turns out sometimes they don't for very long. And
Yeah.
there was a study that just came out recently, uh, that about 2 weeks ago, that intense grief can raise your risk of death by nearly 90%, which is just an extreme number. So, but
Yeah.
that's intense grief. That's when you feel it so intensely. So it doesn't always have to be a spouse. It could be a child. Like if you have an only child and something happens to that child, it can be just connections you have with people. But I thought that was interesting how our brains are wired, that you're grieving so much that that feeling of there's no need for me to live either can be so powerful that people can die for that, from that feeling. So intense grief can raise your risk of death by nearly 90%. I thought that was just amazing that the number's so high.
Yeah, from for you to say something like that as a researcher and how staunch you are about numbers, like that 90%
Yeah.
is drastic.
That is yeah, you don't usually see that numbers that high in research.
Whew. Yeah.
So,
And so I don't want to belabor this. I know it was just a thought that you had, but like using the word intense grief versus grief, like when a spouse or a loved one passes, we grieve, right? Most
mhm.
you have grief, but I wonder, and you may not be able to answer this. I just intense grief. What are the markers? Are there markers that differentiate that from grief?
Yeah, there would be. I don't know exactly
Yeah,
what those
I
markers are,
didn't
but
know that you would, but that's what jumps out to me is like you're married to somebody, let's say for 30 years, and you are in your 60s, 70s, whatever,
mhm.
and you're sad. They passed. They've been in your life for so long, and it hurts. It's grief, but maybe not to the point of intense grief.
Yeah, and would also, now that we're talking about it, should point out that everybody grieves differently.
True,
So
true,
the
true.
fact that if somebody's spouse dies and they don't, that doesn't mean they didn't love their spouse or
Right.
they weren't really grieving. But it's just some people, and I don't know this, but it seems like there's tied to it a dependency on the other person. So it's they've died. There's also that dependency on them. Like, how can I go on without them type of
So
thing.
interesting you say that. I had a family member, two family members, married a long time, and one passed, and the other one for a long time was like, "Aren't I supposed to be over this by now?"
Mm.
Like they were grieving for longer, and I would without knowing the kind of benchmarks. I would say that person was intensely grieving, and they passed not not that dramatically long after their spouse,
Yeah.
but there was a dependency there from one on the other as well. Everything you're saying is
Hmm.
jumping out like, yeah, I know of a case that happened in.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
wow.
We probably most people do. They know of a case other than the
Yeah.
Notebook. but a case
Yeah,
where somebody has passed and then
not a
gone
documentary,
after.
by the way.
Right. Yeah, that's not a documentary.
So I had this might take me longer than I want to kind of ramp up to my question to you, but I've been vocal on the podcast before, and you've gently kind of like pushed back, I would say, but about public school education. But you have educators in your life. Your daughter, from everything I could see, is an amazing public school educator. I have educators in my life. Boy, what would that be?
My
My son's
wife, Casey.
Your wife, amazing public school educator.
Mm-hmm.
Charisse, who I know in my life, amazing public school educator. So I want to start off by saying, I knew this was going to be a long ramp up, but I want to start off by saying this isn't about the educators themselves. The cogs in the machine are not my problem. The machine is my problem. And I've said this before, but it's the idea of like we're teaching kids from an early age the answer to the question so that they can pass tests. That was my that's what I pushed forward. That's my experience. Not saying that's how it is, but my feeling is like our educational system in this country is become, for various reasons I don't need to go into right now, but has just become this idea of like teach the kids to memorize the answers. They take a test, and then we're going to teach them a new set of answers to memorize.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying all that to say I've finally maybe started to wrap my arms around what my actual problem is, and I wanted to ask you some questions about this. That's this. And dang it, I'm going to pause for another second. But all of this is emotional for me because I didn't actually become interested in learning until my 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked on this podcast again about the missed opportunities of high school, college. I didn't care about learning. I didn't care about any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that this is a sole factor, but here's my focus and here's my question, or what I want to talk to you about today. And that's curiosity.
Mm.
And that's my contention is I think that if we did a better job, and I'm speaking again from the complex, the educational complex, not the teachers. My very limited experience with teachers is they do their best within the box that they're being put into, which is here's the curriculum, here's the testing, here's what you have to teach.
And here's the standards, and here's the No Child Left Behind, that if you don't hit these scores, your school loses funding.
Yep. And so those are a lot of the reasons I'm talking about where teachers get forced into teaching in a way that maybe that they know isn't the best, or they isn't best for even them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this idea of curiosity. And when I came to that, I thought, number one, I don't know what the definition of curiosity is. And I don't know if there's a standard definition of it. I don't know if that's one of those nebulous things where we say the word and we kind of know what it means. But my first thing is, do you know, or is there an accepted in like psychology or even ed psych? Is there a definition for curiosity?
Just as when I heard you say, I don't even know of a definition. I just typed in really quick in my computer, define curiosity. And the dictionary says a strong desire to know or learn something.
Okay. And that might, listen, that might be good enough, but so let me take go ahead.
Well, I get where you're coming from. So that was, I think that instead of just a definition, maybe we could talk about like what the properties of curiosity are. And since you're talking about them in education, like is curiosity beneficial to education? Is it needed? Is it necessary or not? Like,
great question.
Yeah. So do you need to be curious to learn or not? And then what does that look like? And then is there, are there benefits to being curious? Are there, are there some bad sides to being curious? And we can just talk.
Well, I got some issues with that part, but I'd love to talk about it. You know what? Let me start from the beginning.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Do you know, is curiosity genetic? Are some people born
So
more curious than others?
yes, in the sense that so anytime you're talking about personality traits
Hmm.
and you're saying they're genetic, it's never one gene. Like if you're talking about eye color, it's one gene. If you're talking about a personality trait, it's a combination of genes that work together. So I'm
Oh,
pretty sure that curiosity, I'm confident that curiosity is does have genetic component to it, but it's a combination of genes just because it's like a personality trait. But I also know it because I know people who aren't curious at all.
what do you
And
mean? Well, like, can you? What do you mean by
well,
that? Like,
like
what?
they'll be telling something. You'll be standing in a group and they'll say something about like soccer, football and soccer, soccer, and somebody will say, "Yeah, I actually got to see a soccer game at Chelsea Stadium, their football game," and they'll go, "Oh, well, one time," and then they'll just like they don't even want to know anymore. Like if I hear that, I'm going, "Wait, you were at Chelsea? Like, tell me more about that," because that's part of what curiosity is the
Hmm.
kind of the desire to learn more about stuff.
Yeah.
And these kind of people, they don't want to. They'll say, "Yeah, well, one time when I was little, I played soccer for like 2 weeks, and then I quit the team, but." I think that, this drink over here, that food is, they just go, and it's not like just one, it could be any topic. They don't care to engage in conversation. So they're not really that curious. And that's a personality thing, I think. So I know that just like any characteristic, it can be nurtured, but there's also a genetic basis to it where some people are
So,
just more
so a little
curious
bit of
about it.
both. A
Yeah.
little bit like, okay, because that's where I wanted to go. Is it possible? Boy, I'm leading the witness, but that's okay. We're not in court.
We're not in
It
court. So go
possible to
ahead.
be born curious and kind of have it drummed out of you,
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so that goes back to my school example. Is someone is born with this personality trait of being curious. Why is that? What is that? Well, how did that come? Asking all the questions, and then the parents at home aren't fostering that. Maybe by
Hmm.
going to what whatever the answer is,
Hmm.
and then we send them to school, and at school they're asking all these questions. It's like, hey, just
Study the material.
remember this answer. This is
Hmm.
what you need to know for the test, and
Yeah.
then it just kind of gets drummed out of them.
Yeah. No,
Okay,
I think
so
that's
we got
true.
nature and nurture, which I okay. Final thing. I'm sorry. I'm really getting excited about this, but because I really am. I'm wow, curious
Yeah,
about
you're
this.
curious.
Sean,
So
don't.
you're not one of the
Um,
people that I was talking about because you actually have a podcast to try to learn more about stuff. So
I,
you are curious for answers,
and I
but you're
feel
saying that
like
started in your 40s.
yeah, I feel like I'm a curious. This is where this is all coming from,
So you've only been
as
curious
usual.
for like 20 or 30 years now.
How old do you think I am?
Aren't you like in your 60s? No, I'm kidding.
Wow. But no. But again, I'm so excited about this topic and all of these things because I'm trying to figure out why I was not curious. I didn't want to know anything more than I needed to know for a vast majority of my life, and then somewhere now I feel like I'm a curious person. I want to know about other people, about how things work, and so we'll get to that. But that's why I'm so animated right now, and so
Hmm.
like is because this topic is like what happened to Sean. Is it possible I was born curious and I had it drummed out of me? Is it possible that I was born not so curious and somehow through nature and through events, external events,
Hmm.
it kind of shaped me to be more curious, and that's what I'm really trying to. And I don't expect you to answer those questions for me, but
No, I think we can get into some of them though that would be helpful. So one thing that you can think about is there's different types of curiosity. So
okay,
there's like intellectual curiosity, which is your more of what you're talking about in school. So you want to learn things that have intellectual meaning and like ideas and concepts and reading and research and, understanding systems, how systems work. That's more of the intellectual curiosity. But then there's also like social curiosity. And that's looking at people and relationships, wanting to know what other people's thoughts are, their motivations. So you might have, if you're a curious person, a curious child, you might have, like you're saying, curiosity kind of drummed out of you just in a mundane school where the teacher doesn't want you to ask questions because they've got their checklist to get through, and plus they might not know the answer, so they don't allow questions, and they just tell you what you have to memorize so that you can pass the test and they can get their funding and whatever. So you feel like that curiosity is drummed out of you, but you could still be socially curious, and you could still be exploring relationships with others and wanting to know more. Like I was saying about the person, you went to Chelsea to watch a game. Like, what was that like?
Yeah.
What were the crowds like? Is that anything like they are here in the States? And you can talk about those and be really curious about that, and then go sit in a classroom and just go, can't wait for this day to end. So I mean, that
You,
could be part of it.
you said something that triggered something else. You said socially, but when I'm not solely blaming, well, this would fall on the teachers again, but what about social pressures? I'm thinking about being in high school and the teacher asks a question and we all raise our hand and then get called on. There's a little bit of fear of being wrong,
Mm-hmm.
which there shouldn't be, right? Because we're in school, we're supposed to be learning. We're not
You're
supposed
not
to know
supposed
the
to know the
answers.
answers yet.
But do you know what I mean? There's that
Yeah.
social little piece of like, I don't want to be wrong in front of my peers,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't really want to. I don't really want to investigate this any further. I don't want to be curious and put myself out there.
Yeah, yeah, the social pressure of it, the peers
Yeah,
from your
yeah,
peers and laughing at you, and because kids in school can't wait to laugh at something that happens in the classroom, but at another student. So yeah,
yeah.
there's that fear of it, definitely, I think.
So you said intellectual curiosity. What's another kind of curiosity?
Well, I just think like there can be
Oh,
some of
wait, you
these.
said social. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
intellectual, social.
there can be some overlap, but like emotional curiosity that can kind of get into social, but even about yourself, like kind of looking inside and being curious about why you have certain emotions. There can be spiritual curiosity to wonder if is there a
Oh,
God, is if so, and kind of exploring that. So there's um, multiple types, and I should also I want to say that curiosity doesn't relate to IQ scores. So when I say that some people aren't curious, that's okay. They don't need to be so there are oh man, I shouldn't do this because this is stereotyping a little bit, but
oh,
if you're just in books all day long as far as like an accountant and you're doing numbers, I know they can be curious about the numbers in the books, but part of that is I don't need to be exploring all of these different things. I need to get this work done right now and I can really focus on this one task. And so that can be a real benefit. And so people without a lot of curiosity, they tend to live in the same place all their life. For vacations, they go to the same vacation spot every time. They watch the same show or the same type of show on TV. They don't branch out. They listen to the same music all their life. So it's like this, there's like a comfort in the known, what's known. So
right.
I'm really comfortable with my routine and what I know, and so I'm not curious about trying all these new things out all the time. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a really stable person, and they can be extremely smart and intelligent. It's just they don't have that drive to try to figure things out. And when we lived in Minnesota for 4 or 5 years, we lived in a small town south of the Twin Cities, and Casey had teaching colleagues that said, I was, and by the way, where we lived in Mankato was maybe 50 miles from the state line to Nebraska, right below us.
Mm.
And they said, we were in high school one time and said, do you want to drive over to Nebraska just to say we've been out of Minnesota? So they drove 50 miles and stopped at at a quick trip just on the other side of the Nebraska line, and then drove back so that they could say that they'd been outside of Minnesota, and they didn't really have a curiosity to do anything else or go anywhere else. And
Right.
so some people are like that; they're just happy in the town with the friends they have, and that's okay, you know. And then other people want to explore. Like I always wanted to explore everything
Right.
and drive places, but some people don't want to, and that's okay too.
I was just thinking about motivation for right. Like
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of statements. I feel like because I don't know like if this is true or not for from a scientific standpoint, but the if I know absolutely nothing about a topic, I'm not really curious about. It doesn't motivate me to learn more about it. If I feel confident about that topic,
Mhm.
I'm not super like it's somewhere in the middle. There's this like I don't know sweet spot, but of
Yeah.
I hear something, a tidbit, something I pick up just enough information where I go, I want to know more about that. I want to learn more about that. And then I'm almost it's not obsessive, but I am like I want to know as much as I can about this topic. And I do these deep dives on these crazy topics that I don't know nothing about. I don't know a lot
Yeah.
about. It's that middle ground.
Yeah, that's actually called, I think that's called the knowledge gap or something like that. And by the way, did I say they would drive from Minnesota down to Nebraska?
You did.
I meant to say Iowa. I don't know why I said
Iowa.
Nebraska. They would drive down to Iowa, and I know that because we would drive to Kansas from Minnesota and drive through Iowa. So
Okay.
I think Nebraska is under the Dakotas. So sorry for my geography
Okay.
mix up there. I need to be more curious about where the states are. But there's this what's called I think it's called the knowledge gap. It's with curiosity, and it's the inverted U, which exactly what you're talking about. If you don't know, and this is for everybody, curious people and non-curious people, if
Okay.
you don't know anything about a topic, then you're probably not going to be very curious about it because there's no grounding there. There's nothing to grab hold of. Like, you know, if I said something about planets, you know, out in space, you know, for a lot of people, they would go, I don't care. Like you say, you know, like Saturn is so light on, you know, its density is so little that it could float in water. And you're like, I don't care. That didn't even, you know, or something about you know, like a cell, like a neuron, or like mitochondria used to be a free living organism. Like, I don't care. Because if you don't have but if you tell a biologist that, they want to talk about it. Or,
Yes.
yeah. And then there's people like if you know everything, like you already know the names of the big cities in the US. So if you say, let's talk about some of the big cities like New York City and Chicago and Houston and LA, you're like, I already know that because that's something that you know a lot about. So it's like neither one of those will get your curiosity going very much, but it's somewhere in the middle where you have a little bit of information, and then, you know, like maybe a better one is weather patterns. Like everybody is a weather expert, right? And so they're like, I can feel it's going to rain, or I know this is going to happen. And then you start to watch the news channel, and they start talking about pressures coming down and how that you're like, just could you just get to what the temperature is going to be this week? Because that's what you know. I'm not curious about how it happens. I know what hot means. I know what cold means. I know what rain means. So I'm not curious about the others. So yeah, there's that knowledge gap. It's like an inverted U that
Yeah.
describes curiosity. If you hit the sweet spot, like you said, where you know something about something, you're more likely to be curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead.
You also mentioned uh, something just a little bit ago about learning. You said something about you're scared to guess. So there's been research about curiosity, and they're looking at different brain areas that process it. And one of the original studies, I'm thinking back now, so I don't remember who it was or when, but it was in the early 2000s. There was a study on curiosity to show, and there's been multiple since then, but to show that the dopaminergic pathways that release dopamine
Mm.
respond to curiosity when you have some new information that you're just getting ready to learn, new facts, new information. That system responds in the same way it does to external rewards like money and food, Like when you see, like, I could get some money right now, and the dopamine's released and you get really excited. The same thing happens for curious people when they're getting some tidbits of information. It's like that same rush of, this is exciting to me. And people that don't have a lot of curiosity don't get that same rush. But when you get that rush, it helps consolidate memories. So it helps you remember things so much better. So there have been studies to show where they'll measure people in an MRI, fMRI.
fMRI, yeah.
Yeah, and they'll look at brain activity, when they're curious and when they're not, and they're giving them some information, but they're putting other things in with it, and then they'll have them, maybe a couple months later, they'll test them on the information, and they don't remember the facts that were given to them when they weren't in a curious mode, but they have fairly good memories of when they were in that curious moment. And it's because of the way dopamine interacts with the hippocampus, and it just helps consolidate, lock in memories. Because if you're curious about this information, you're going to remember it better.
So I know what you said about, personality trait genetically, but my path here, I'm wondering can we train the brain to be more curious?
Mm-hmm.
And if we train the brain to be more curious from a younger age, then you're saying I get a dopamine hit from getting information, whatever that information might be.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually increases my recall, or at least the
memory.
consolidation of memories.
Yeah, and in fact, it even boosts it a little bit more if you guess the answer and it's wrong. That even consolidates it more, because that's, yeah. So if I'm learning something and I say, oh, that must mean that B is connected to C, and then they go, no, B is actually connected to D, and then you're like, oh, and you'll remember that better than if B was connected to C.
I got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. When you first said it, I was like, no, this makes sense.
This is different from, we've talked before about, like, in training, how you say always train. Like if you use visual imagery, always succeed. And if you set up a training, always make it where people can succeed.
Win.
That yes. Because especially in your mind, when you're setting up a scenario where you lose, that's you practicing losing.
Correct.
But this is different. This is, I've tried and I missed it, which locks in the right answer that much better. So if in training somebody does something wrong on their own and you correct it right then, they're probably going to remember it better later. But it solidifies it when they get the wrong answer, and then you give them the right answer. So you were asking about curiosity, about teaching it.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot teach somebody how to be curious. I mean, it's really hard to even define. We were even saying, is there even a definition for it? So it's hard to say, here's how you can be curious. I mean, we also want to teach children, well, and adults, and students in college, how to be critical thinkers. Yes. And that's something that's really hard. That's a little bit easier to say, here's how to be a critical thinker, but here's how to be curious. You can talk about some of the habits curious people have, but a better way to teach it is to teach it indirectly, to focus on creating curious moments, like moments of curiosity, where, like, you have your students in, I don't know, unstructured play, or you have them explore ideas, or you have them get in groups and try to think of things and answers. And you're not just giving the answer, you're having them try to come up with answers, and then talking about why they came up with that answer, what made them think of that, and then giving them little pieces of information that, like little bits, like you lead them down a pathway, so to speak, that starts to foster curiosity.
Yeah.
So it's not teaching it directly; it's more fostering it and nurturing.
I like that I like the way you described it. When I said teaching, I was not thinking about, in the parlance of this podcast, someone talking to my on channel saying, be curious or think about this. I'm thinking about the back channel, because repetition. So back to my term of teaching it. is if I can get your back channel going, we're going to do this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Then I mean, from what I'm learning from you in this podcast, that's just the way that my brain is going to work for moving forward. Right. So, like,
Yes.
not saying curiosity is important, curiosity is great, all that. I don't care that your on channel necessarily knows about that.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to know a little bit, but it's through repetition. I just keep doing whatever the thing is. I don't know what it is, but I keep doing the thing. And over time, through repetition, your back channel just goes, we're going to be curious because this is important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And you just gave a couple of examples of how I love that word, how to foster curiosity. I was thinking, this is ill formed, but I was thinking like giving them a little tidbit or a little bit of information, try to get them to the sweet spot
Mm-hmm.
of that inverted U you were talking about. Just enough that then they'll take it over and want to know more about it, be curious.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I so I'll give an example of when I tried to do something like that with my kids.
Okay.
They were in like first, third, and fourth grades, I think. And I had heard about I wasn't good at programming because computers were fairly new at that point, especially personal computers. And I'd had one for a little while by this time, but I was always fascinated with coding and people who could write programs and things
Hmm.
like that. And I was doing a little bit of it in graduate school. I was starting to learn it, coding, and I'm trying to think visual what was it, Visual Basic was the code system that turned out to be, I think, C plus or something, I don't know, but it used to be
Wow.
Visual Basic is what I started learning on because it was a little bit more user friendly. It gave you
Hmm.
a board that you could drag a button over to and resize it and then give it a task so that people could push the button and it would tell it what to do. So it was kind of helping you code at that point. And I thought, man, if I would have known this for my kids, I'm going to do this for my kids. And I did a little bit of research. I'm going to help them learn to program. And I found a program called Alice that you could download for free and it would let your kids start practicing coding. So I got that for all of them. Oh, I got it for our home computer. And I asked them all I was trying to encourage them, like, you can make people run and jump and do these different, see if you can figure this out. And it never really took off. And I just had a conversation with my daughter. She was the oldest at the time. I had a conversation with her just a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and asked her about it because it came up somehow. And I asked her, and she said, yeah, I remember you telling us. I remember it being there and you really encouraging us, but you never showed us how to use it. I went on a few times and I was trying to figure it out. And I couldn't figure it out. So I just gave up. I was like, I didn't know how to use it either. So I think that was at that, we said curiosity is an inverted U. She was over at the end where you don't know anything about something. So you're not curious enough to try to pursue it. And so none of them really learned how to code or program. So it's not the end of the world. They're all doing fine, but that would have been a neat
No,
skill
but
to have.
yes. Yeah. But it still goes back to, so unintentionally, I've stumbled upon this inverted U is where I'm now focused.
Yeah.
I thought I was asking about curiosity, but if we're talking about trying to inspire curiosity in our kids, or if we're teachers, our students, or
Mm-hmm.
just in general, figuring out this inverted U there might be something to that.
Yeah.
Um, it's I feel like curiosity, humans be humaning, but when you say curiosity killed the cat,
Mm-hmm.
to me that brings with it a negative connotation with curiosity.
Mm.
Don't be curious.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes,
Because your
like,
cat will die.
well, yeah, but I mean, again, curiosity is not a good thing. Stay in your lane, mind your
Mm.
business, stay, whatever the thing is. I feel like it's a lot of that. And then also, I think for some people, curiosity is kind of quirky,
Mm-hmm.
especially in kids.
Mm-hmm.
You ask a lot of questions,
Yeah.
or whatever it is, or even that curiosity is kind of optional. Like you don't need to know any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to know this stuff. And those are all negative markers for me of like and again, I'm saying personally, I
Mm-hmm.
have flourished in my later in life because of curiosity. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. It's
Yes.
this thirst for information. I guess it's knowledge, but even though, because you said IQ tests, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like IQ is more of your innate ability to take in information and use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I use all of the information I take in at this with the curiosity thing. It's more of like attaining the information.
So yeah, so that's the kind of the dopamine reward, the intrinsic reward of
Hmm.
gaining that. Is kind of like, gaining money type thing. It's gaining knowledge, and that's intrinsically satisfying.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm sorry, but the brain. Let's take it to the brain for a second, because something that we were just talking about feels like um, I'm curious about something that I'm unfamiliar with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is like it's almost uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't that have a like a typical effect on my brain? Uncertainty or not knowing something.
What do you mean by typical effect?
I guess I'm just
So,
looking at like is uncertainty a bad thing for in my brain?
oh no. So uncertainty can be that can be kind of the driver or the motivator for curiosity.
Oh, okay, okay.
So here's what, if you were asking, like, can when curiosity goes wrong, so to speak, curiosity killed the cat. I
Yeah.
think that professors' kids notoriously uh, ask a lot of questions because professors usually encourage that at home. So their kids are used, their conversations with kids are more like, well, why would you do that? And what about this? Have you thought about that? And, trying to build critical thinking, curiosity, those types of things. And it's just, we're doing that all day long in the lab with our students in the lab and with classes that we're teaching. And then we come home and we're doing that with our kids. Professors' kids can sometimes be annoying and obnoxious because of being too, like, in social settings, like, just to continue to ask why and just continue to ask questions or bring up subjects that really are a little bit taboo in a social setting like this, like, and
Hmm.
not having any not knowing what their, this is how I should say it, they don't know what their boundaries are. They don't really have boundaries set up
Oh,
for social
boundaries.
setting. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
boundary issues. So that's that, inappropriate questions in social settings, topics that make other people feel uncomfortable. They just don't have the boundaries for that. And so some people will say, oh, that kid's annoying, or that kid's just too nosy. They're really intrusive. So they don't know kind of when to stop asking questions, which can be annoying, but it can also be, um, you know, if kids, because their brains are young and impressionable and learning, if you value curiosity so much, then now it comes back to the uncertainty that you were talking about. Now all of a sudden, uncertainty seems like a bad thing. So if I'm
Oh,
uncertain,
okay.
I need to know the answer right now. I'm curious. I've got to go explore it right now. I need answers right now. So it'd be, you also have to teach your kids that it's okay to sit with uncertainty for a while. And some things you might not know for a long time. You might not understand, and that's okay. Uncertainty is okay, just like curiosity is okay, but it can build like an anxiety.
Yeah.
With kids can become anxious with that, and then that can start affecting them in other ways. And then if you're if you really breed curiosity to where you want your children to explore and learn, it can lead to them starting to explore things that you really don't want them to, like in drugs and other things. They become greater risk takers. So it's kind of
Uh,
like you want them to be curious, but you also want them to realize there's boundaries to curiosity. And you don't have to, when you're curious, you don't have to experience everything for yourself. So you can see what drug addiction does to other people and just know that would happen to you. So that can end your curiosity there. And so, yeah,
mhm.
there's kind of some things to be careful about as well, because that could be the curiosity that killed the cat. Like, you can, don't become extreme risk takers. Don't think that you can't sit with uncertainty. You have to have answers. You just annoy people, because then you can become socially isolated, and
Yeah.
can have some negative things to it.
Moderation. Moderation in all
Moderation.
things, right? Like
That's great.
that's really good for me to hear because I was on this path of like curiosity. Like you can't have too much curiosity, and I forgot about that little thing called temperance,
Yeah.
right? Like you gotta. So yeah. So like there's the again the middle ground of like fostering curiosity,
Hmm.
but also being okay with not knowing some things. I'm really
Yeah.
curious what a certain drug is like. That okay, we've gone too far because I don't
Yeah.
want you trying heroin because
Yeah.
you're curious
Experimenting
what
with it.
heroin's
Yeah.
like.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So again, like this idea of making it okay to to strike out and try and be wrong. That's okay,
Hmm.
but in an effort to try to gain information, but to a degree. But then let me
Yes.
just ask before, because I'm the last thing I'm curious about is in the brain.
Hmm.
So now let's talk like the actual like structure of the brain. What are we talk? What area of the brain are we talking about with curiosity? Do we know?
There's multiple areas.
Okay.
So it's when you're talking about kind of the dopamine circuit, you're talking about like the striatum, the nucleus accumbens, because that's where dopamine kind of originates in the pathway, the
Mm-hmm.
dopaminergic pathways in the midbrain, the VTA. But then there's also like the memory side of it, which would be the hippocampus. There's I was saying that if you make an error, you remember it even better.
Yeah.
You know what the error detection area is?
Oh yeah. The ACC,
ACC.
AC.
Yeah, the
Yes.
anterior
ACC.
cingulate cortex. Yeah, so that's
Sure.
that's also involved, and the
Okay.
prefrontal cortex, which is kind of where your awareness, your conscious awareness, the on channel is that's getting the answers to the questions. So there's several brain areas involved in curiosity, and I think there's been quite a few studies that look at like the fMRI to show
Mm-hmm.
how those areas are active when people are curious. Like they'll ask trivia questions around, so people will fill out ahead of time, these are the things that I know a little bit about, that I'm curious about. Here's some things I don't know anything about. So when the trivia questions come up about things they don't know anything about, those areas aren't active. When it's
Mm-hmm.
something I know some things about, this I'm really curious, you start asking trivia questions around those areas do become active for that person because they're more curious. And again, it's some of the same pathways that are active when you're earning money, for example. So curiosity is a real motivator for
Yeah.
people, and it's there's a couple of different ways also to think about it as information sampling, and then information sampling, information search, like searching for information or sampling. So curiosity around sampling would be if you play, which I don't, but like fantasy football. Do you play fantasy football?
I do.
You do.
Just over my shoulder, do you see that trophy?
The Lombardi.
Well, that's the Fantasy Football League trophy. And I want to be
Wow.
clear, it's not mine. It is my
Oh.
wife's.
Oh, wow. Go
Why
Andrea.
it's
Yeah.
in, I don't know why it's in my office. I think it's a reminder that she won the league last year, our family and friend league.
That's called
But
rubbing it in
yes,
your face.
yeah, and it's there every time I look at my camera. I just see her trophy over there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But anyway, yes, we play
So
fantasy football.
I don't, because I feel like it would make me watch the football games differently. Like I would,
It does. It
yeah.
does.
And that might be a better way to watch it, but so I'm not curious about what that would be like.
Oh,
I'm happy with where I'm at, watching my team,
okay.
where I live and
Yeah.
die by this one game every week, and
Yeah.
not worrying about other people's games. I like to watch other games just for fun. But anyway, that's beside that. So the information sampling is what I was talking about. That
Yeah.
curiosity would be where you would check stats like running back stats last week. what are their stats in a dome stadium versus an outdoor stadium? How does this quarterback do against these defenses? That's a curiosity to learn as much things as you can, to sample as much information as you can, to give you the best choices for your fantasy football that week.
Right.
So it's kind of like goal directed curiosity. But then the information search is open ended. And that's where you just want to explore things. That's like, I want to drive down to Iowa just to see what Iowa's like. Or I want to travel, uh, have you traveled much, or is that something that's interesting to you or not?
It is. I've traveled a
Yeah.
little bit. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call myself a traveler, but I've traveled
I
a little
found
bit.
that once we traveled a little bit, then I became even more curious about it. And so I think it's
Mm,
that inverted U, because I was really interested in and curious about other states here in the US, because I mean, Casey's from North Carolina, I'm from Kansas. We've lived in Nevada, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Florida, Kansas, North Carolina. So we've lived so many places. And then when we're there,
hmm.
we travel around. I should have asked Casey. I should ask Casey because I'll probably get this wrong, but I think that I've been to 47 states. I know I have not
Really?
been to Hawaii or Alaska, and I have
Okay.
not been to Maine. But part of the reasons I've been to so many states is because living in different places, I would go to conferences in those regions. So, like when we lived in Nevada, I would go to psychology conferences and neuroscience conferences in California, Oregon, Washington. My sisters, so family members, my sisters have lived in like Montana, Texas, Louisiana, Ohio. So, going to see them. And then when I was a kid, our family had different vacations every year. So, like one year when I was in high school, we went to my cousin was in graduate school at NYU. So we drove up to Buffalo and saw the Niagara Falls, and then over to NYU, and then down to North Carolina to visit a family friend, then back home. We were always driving. So
Hmm.
going through different states. So I was curious about that, but really nothing outside of the US. And then I spent a summer doing research in the UK. And then all of a sudden, I'm really interested in when people have gone to different areas around the globe. And it just kind of builds that curiosity once you learn something about it. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the information search, where it's open ended and you're searching for things like
Hmm.
travel. Channel surfing is another way. People who aren't that curious will turn on their show and then turn it off. And other people will sample a lot. So yeah, I think that there's also that goal directed curiosity and the open ended curiosity, which again are different types of curiosity.
Yeah. Is there a visual curiosity?
There's uh there's
I'm
I think
feeling like,
sensory curiosity.
oh, maybe that's what it is. But I feel
Yeah.
like that idea of like you see something out in
Hmm.
the backyard or in the field and you're like, what
Yeah.
is that? Oh, I wonder how that got there. Or, you know,
Yeah, you just reminded me of another study, but it was just a study um, where they used visual stimuli that was hard. What am I trying? Ambiguous
mm,
stimuli to show to people, and then people that were really curious, those pathways really light up where they're trying to figure out what it is, and some people just go, "Yeah, I don't
okay.
know what it," and so then they would try to talk and describe it and figure it out, and other people didn't
Hmm.
really care. But it was be like an ambiguous picture that they would look at, and then were they curious about that or not? So you're
That's
right, like
exactly what I'm
sensory. Yeah.
wondering. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, again, I feel like there's some people
Hmm.
who in that scenario would go, they would see something in the backyard and go, oh.
Yeah.
And then other people like, what is that?
Yeah.
Oh, how did that get there? Oh, I wonder. And all of the curiosity kicks in, and yeah, you just answered it. But I know people that would look at that and go, okay, and then
Yeah.
moving on.
Yeah, my
And
wife's curious. So it would be like that. It would be like, what is that in the backyard? It looks like a box. How did it get there? I don't know. What kind of a box? Like, who would have put that? We got to get to the bottom of it. Not just
yes,
we figured out what it
yes,
is. We got to get to the bottom of everything about the box. Like,
yes.
who'd put it there? How did it get? Yeah. What was in it? Why?
That's
So
what I'm
that would
talking
be,
about.
yeah, that would
Yeah.
be
Oh, I wonder,
sensory
all
curiosity.
those, that's me now. And I think there was a time in my life where Casey would have been like, what is that? And I'd say, it's a box.
Yeah.
Where'd it come from? I don't know. I don't care. I just know there's a box there. No. But what was in that box? I'm telling you, I don't know. I don't know.
Or what's that smell? Yeah, I kind of smell. We got to go find it. It's
Yeah.
like, no, it's just a smell that passed by. Let's leave. No, I've
That's
got to get to the source of that smell.
Yeah, but I'm advocating, if you can't tell, I'm advocating for what's that smell, where'd it come from, how'd that happen? Like, because
Yeah.
I think even though it might not help me, and maybe it doesn't help me at all, but maybe it doesn't help me in the moment where I figure out where that box came from. I feel like in my life, where I'm at today, sitting here, curiosity is helping me to learn more things, to be more engaging. And I'll tell you, in social situations, I'll give you the cheat or the life hack is me being curious. I find that I ask people about themselves way more than I run off at the mouth about myself. I'm asking, and people like that.
That
People
is
like
huge.
to talk about themselves. And it's not like I do it for that reason. I just find myself fascinated with
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to that Chelsea thing, I'm putting myself there, and I know with zero doubt, 100% certainty, you tell me you were at a soccer match in Chelsea, and I'm like, let's dig into this.
Yeah.
I want to know how this happened, what it was like, and I think that, and again, that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, is I think it is very beneficial to be curious, but I've learned from you today, as usual, there put some boundaries, put some guardrails up
Mm-hmm.
here around our curiosity. But
And especially for children.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
especially if you're, because teaching children to be curious is great because they do learn more. They
hmm
so, and if you would have been, if you would have had classrooms growing up, and by the way, we've talked about the teachers. We know there's great teachers out there, but we also know very well that there are some really crappy teachers
yeah,
and that don't
yeah,
really, like, what are you doing here? You're just trying to get the last 5 years in so you can retire. Just,
yeah.
you're hurting children at this point. So there are teachers like that. So curiosity does help with learning. I mean, there's research to show that we mentioned that you remember things better when you're curious about it. So asking those open-ended questions, I think there's even schools that started based on that. Didn't they? Like the Montessori schools or something were around children centered. I don't know. I'm probably butchering this, but where you try to have children become curious and about things and then learn about those things. So they kind of pick their own topic, so to speak, and then they learn more
hmm
that way. And so there's things like that. But yeah, you do have to have the guardrail around it. But I think being curious overall can be a real benefit. I mean, and I think I'm saying that biasly because that's what leads you into research and areas like that, is if you're curious. So I like curiosity because I like figuring out things. So researchers are curious. Those are the open-ended questions you're trying to figure out. It's what drives you. Like, who cares if you're studying, whatever you're studying? It's like, no, we need to know this. Like, why? We need to know. And usually there's reasons that too, but just to know it is a good reason sometimes.
I'll be honest with you, John. I didn't even, until you just said that, I didn't even think about the implication of researchers. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to be curious.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could replicate that study. I wonder why this thing does this thing. Hey, let's try and researchers have to be curious, right?
Yeah. That's one of the, yeah, I think that's a
I
prerequisite, or you're not going to go into research. You're going to do
I
something different,
completely glossed over that fact until you just kind of smacked me in the face with it. That
which is why I said professors' kids usually are annoying, because
yeah,
the professors are so curious and they're telling their kids, they're asking those same questions to their kids. Like, look at that bug. Where did that bug come? They're always just looking and
hmm
learning, and then it needs boundaries, like we're saying, in guardrails.
yeah, guardrails for curiosity, but
Yeah.
just the same. This is
Well,
this
one
is
other thing you mentioned, a
yeah.
hack. I think that might be one of the key takeaways from this whole podcast when you said kind of a life hack.
hmm
When you're talking to somebody else, if there are listeners out there that are awkward in social settings like me, that you're trying to figure, like you're going, man, I just hate these situations because I never know what to talk about. Like you go up to somebody and say, hey, what's going on? And it's just like awkward. If you want to break that, the hack is to ask them something about themselves. Maybe not just say, what do you do? How long have you been doing that? Where are you from? Where did you, not like that. But if you find out something about them, say, tell me a little bit about that. And then even if you're not interested, act genuinely interested. And then that people open up, and then like it becomes really easy to talk to people. Then at
Mm-hmm.
that point, you can also share about you or whatever, but just like the icebreaker is getting somebody to tell something about themselves. And one of my colleagues at Minnesota State, Dan Sakow, was probably the master of that. More than he was so smooth at it. And I think I did ask him about it at one point, if he was doing that on purpose, because no matter who he was talking to, within like 15 seconds, he had them just telling all kinds of things about themselves. And he seemed genuinely interested, and he said he was genuinely interested. So I believe him. But he said that that's kind of what he started doing to make conversation, icebreakers. And he was so good at it. You didn't even, you know, he would even be talking to me at times. I would go, hey, wait a minute. I've been talking a lot about you. You pulled that on me, didn't you? So, but that's just such a great way to talk to people and get people talking about stuff. So I think that's a life hack that maybe everybody could take away. Something really important from this talk is what you mentioned there,
Yeah,
being
and
curious
again,
about others.
if you're awkward, you just said it. If you're awkward in social situations, you don't have to talk about yourself. You just have to tweak a little bit, get people talking about themselves. I am honest in my assessment of mine was the inverse of that. I'm pretty good in social situations. I can talk to just about anybody. I've never been awkward in social situations. I honestly feel like it's this curiosity that I have about the world, about life,
Mm-hmm.
about how things work,
Mm-hmm.
that bled into social situations, that led me to this realization of like, I don't really love talking about myself that much. I
Mm-hmm.
love learning about other people. And
Mm-hmm.
from the curiosity standpoint, there are so many fascinating stories out there of to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
There are.
just by kind of going, where are you from? What do you do? Whatever. Wait, what? Tell me
Mm-hmm.
more. Oh, wait, what does that mean? Like, and I just have learned. I've met so many fascinating people
Mm-hmm.
that you wouldn't know they were fascinating until you start this process. I've learned so many things, and it's all just from what I self-assessment. I don't. It's probably not true, but I think I've become a curious person,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of circle back to the beginning, I'm still kicking myself on what I missed out on for the first 40 years of my life, because how much more I could have learned about people and about things and about how things worked, and I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for our listener out there, if you're not doing this, start.
Yeah,
Be curious.
and obviously the other point you're proving is it's never too late.
Never too late.
It's never too late. If you weren't curious before, or you had it, what did you say at the beginning? Drummed out of you in school, I think
Yeah.
it's the term. Yeah, if you had
Yeah.
drummed out of you, you can get it back. Yeah.
You can get it back. And I'm in my 60s, or at least so John
Or
thinks,
70s, I don't
and
know.
or my 70s. And I've learned this new thing. So it's never too late to rewire your brain, to be more curious, but with guardrails. So, right, even for adults with some guardrails, but if curiosity killed the cat, satisfaction brought him back. Okay,
There you
so
go.
let's not be afraid to be curious.
Yeah, there's things worse than dying, right? And that's
Uh,
living as an uncurious person, maybe.
yes, I love that. Thank you, John. Hey, and thank you for this week. I know when I sent you the topic of just curiosity, I can imagine you were like, this guy's off his rocker. But
No, I like that topic. When you sent it, I thought, yeah, that'd be a good topic. And then I hate to admit it, I didn't do my homework. So I
if you
hope
didn't
that
say that, I don't know that anybody can tell that you
okay,
didn't do
all
your
right,
homework.
okay, that's
Uh,
good.
as you,
I meant to say I studied relentlessly for nights preparing.
that's what it seemed like. That's what
Okay,
it seemed
good.
like. In all sincerity, John, as always, thank you so much for your time and the information.
Stay
I learned a
curious.
lot. Oh, stay curious.
Yeah.
Can we change that to just ours is, because I like when you say flex your, what do you say? Keep flexing your brain.
Yeah. Keep flexing your brain,
Yeah, but I
and then
like stay curious.
stay
Yeah.
curious.
All right. Those are your two catchphrases. You can choose between those two every
Okay.
week.
All right. All right.
Thank you, John. For everybody else, as every week, I hope you got something out of it this week. I know I did. And if you are not currently following John on his TikTok, brain_dude, still pumping out great content. I don't know how he doesn't have 1 million followers. I don't understand how this works, but how these algorithms work. But look at him. Our socials, everything is John Teaches Sean. We're on TikTok. We are on Blue Sky. Our website, johnteachessean.com. And wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you haven't done it already, subscribe to the podcast, follow the podcast, and finally tell a friend if you like what you're hearing. If you think someone would be curious about our podcast, tell them. And yeah, I really appreciate it. I just selfishly have so much fun doing this every week, and I hope y'all are getting something out of it, because I know that I am. So until next week, thank you, and we'll see you then.
Brain juice Sean.